All right. Man, peace and power elevation to all you beautiful people out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. So today I am going to deal with the topic about somebody who was a very important figure in the African American history and in the African diaspora. And this man dedicated his life, his hard work, and his focus on studying the history about African Americans and those in the diaspora. So if it wasn't for this man, who we gonna have some information, who I will share information about in a moment. If it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have all these Black educators, teachers, scholars of today. You would not be able to get access to the library and look up information about African American history or any other history regarding to Black people. Hell, we wouldn't even be here talking about it today if it wasn't for this man, because he exposed it. He made it to where it become accessible to us and for us to know. So we must give credit to where credit is due. He has taught so many people. He had so many students. And one of the students of his was Dr. John Henry Clark. Dr. John Henry Clark learned from Carter G Woodson. And from there, he went on and became a professor and taught many other people. So the reason why we have Black History Month, it started off as Negro Week. Then it became the Negro History Month. Then he came out with the Negro Journal, which deals with not only historical information, but also events that was taking place in the Black community as well. Okay. But anyways, so Black History Month, which is February, which is the shortest month, but we should look at that as a national celebration. So when people say, oh, we need to get rid of Black history, is no reason to have Black History Month, that is an utter disrespect. It's very disrespectful to say that, only because our people work so hard to put that out there, and there's a reason why it's there. So it can be celebrated throughout the entire month. So it could be a month of commemoration. And so with that being said, the person that I am talking about, and I am going to put on here, is Carter G Woodson. That's who I want to talk about today. So yeah, it's very important. He's a very important figure of ours. And it's sad that he does not gain enough recognition within the Black community. It's very sad. Everybody else can be honored, but this man don't get enough honor. And I want to know why. For those who are putting out the source and who's giving this man credit, shout out to you. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. But for the rest of us, we need to get on board. All right. So I have some information that I would like to share. I have some books right here. All right. So I'm going to read some of the information from his books. Give me a second. So one of the books I got is The Miseducation of the Negro, which I'm quite sure a lot of people have read, and I have read it myself. I had read this book like 2 or 3 times because it was just that good. And it was very informative. So I got this book right here. And then I have this book, this book came out before The Miseducation of the Negro. It's called The Education of the Negro. Okay. So I'm going to read some information from these 2 books right here. All right. But other than that, go ahead, share the video, hit the notification bell, like and subscribe to the channel, do all that great stuff. And that's that. All right, here we go. So who was Carter G Woodson? Who was he? I just post it up right there. So let's look at the introduction of his life. Again, you can go on Wiki1/Wikipedia and you can find out various information. So Carter G. Woodson, or Carter Godwin Woodson, was born on December the 19th, 1875, and he died April the 3rd of 1950. All right, he was an American historian, author, journalist, and the founder of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Okay, he did. That's a journal. And it's an organization which was founded by him. And he was one of the first scholars to study the history of the African diaspora, including African American history. And he was a founder of the Journal of Negro History in 1916. So let's take a look at the Journal of Negro History, the Journal of African American History, right? It went from 1916 to 2001. It's a quarterly academic journal covering African American life and history. It was founded in 1916 by Carter G. Woodson. The journal is owned and overseen by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History and was established in 1916 by Woodson and Jesse E. Moreland. Okay. The journal published original scholarly articles on all aspects of the African American experience. The journal annually published more than 60 reviews of recently published books in the fields of African and African American life and history. As of 2018, the journal is published by the University of Chicago Press on behalf of the ASELA, which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. All right. So, as you can see, it goes into the information about it. All right. So it says the journal was the dominant source to learn about African American history at the time of its conception because there were no other such texts. The journal gave Black scholars the chance to publish articles examining African American history and culture while also documenting the current Black experience in the United States. While the journal mainly published the work of Black authors and encouraged their academic success, it was also an outlet for white scholars who had different views than their counterparts. Woodson's effort to cover African American history at a time where it was unacknowledged had led him to receive the nickname Father of African American History. All right. So let's go back to his biography. Okay. So it also states that in February of 1926, he launched the celebration of Negro Week, the precursor of Black History Month. That's why I say Black History Month is very important. We're going to get into more details about that. So let's look at his early life. So he was born in New Canton, Virginia on December the 19th, 1875, the son of former slaves Anna Eliza Riddle and James Henry Woodson. His parents were both illiterate, and his father, who had helped the Union soldiers during the Civil War, supported the family as a carpenter and farmer. The Woodson family were extremely poor, but proud as both his parents told him that it was the happiest days of their lives when they became free. Woodson was often unable to regularly attend primary school so as to help out on the farm. Nonetheless, through self-instruction, he was able to master most school subjects. So, in other words, Carter G. Woodson was an autodidact. He was an autodidact. He had to teach himself because he didn't have the time of the day to always go to school. And in that time in the South, if your parents were very poor, you had to figure out a way to how to pitch in some income and help take care of the household. And that's what he had to do. So it wasn't always a case of being able to go to school 5 days a week and be off on the weekends. No. You either, sometimes you went to school, sometimes you didn't go to school. And so that's how it was with children in the South, who, especially those who grew up in the country. So they had to work on the field, work out there in the farm or whatever, to just make sure the family earns a substantial income. Yeah. So let's continue. And it says, at the age of 17, Woodson followed his brother to Huntington, where he hoped to attend a brand new secondary school for blacks, Douglas High School. However, Woodson, forced to work as a coal miner, was able to devote only minimal time each year to his schooling. In 1895, the 20-year-old Woodson finally entered Douglas High School full-time and received his diploma in 1897. From 1897 to 1900, Woodson taught at Winona. Yeah. In 1900, he was selected as the principal of Douglas High School. He earned his Bachelor of Literature degree from Beer College in Kentucky in 1903 by taking classes part-time between 1901 and 1903. And from 1903 to 1907, Woodson was a school supervisor in the Philippines. Woodson later attended the University of Chicago, where he was awarded an A.B. and A.M. in 1908. That means an art of bachelor's and art of master's. He was a member of the first black professional fraternity, Sigma Pi Phi, and a member of Omega Psi Phi. He completed his PhD in history at Harvard University in 1912, where he was the second African American after W.E.B. Du Bois to earn a doctorate. His doctoral dissertation, The Disruption of Virginia, was based on research he did at the Library of Congress while teaching high school in Washington, D.C. After earning the doctoral degree, he continued teaching in public schools as no university was willing to hire him. Ultimately, becoming the principal of the all-black Armstrong Manual Training School in Washington, D.C., he later joined the faculty at Howard University as a professor and there as a dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. His dissertation advisor was Albert Bushnell Hart, who had also been the advisor for Du Bois, with Edward Channing and Charles Haskins also on the committee. Woodson felt that the American Historical Association had no interest in Black history, knowing that though he was a dues-paying member of the AHA, he was not allowed to attend to AHA conferences. Woodson became convinced he had no future in the white-dominant historical profession, and to work as a Black historian would require creating an institutional structure that would make it possible for Black scholars to study history. As Woodson lacked the funds to finance such a new institutional structure himself, he turned to philanthropist institutions such as the Carnegie Foundation, the Julius Rosenwald Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation. Okay, so let's go down and let's skip. All right, so it goes on to say that convinced that the role of his own people in the American history and in the history of other cultures were being ignored or misrepresented among scholars, Woodson realized the need for research into the neglected past of African Americans. Along with William D. Hartgrove, George Cleveland Hall, Alexander L. Jackson, James E. Stamps, he founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History on September the 9th, 1915 in Chicago. That was the year Woodson published The Education of the Negro prior to 1861. His other books followed: A Century of Negro Migration, 1918, The History of the Negro Church, 1927. His work, The Negro in Our History, has been reprinted in numerous editions and was revised by Charles H. Wesley after Woodson death in 1950. Okay? And Woodson described the purpose of the ASNLH as the scientific study of the neglected aspect of Negro life and history by training a new generation of Blacks in historical research and methodology. Believing that history belonged to everybody, not just the historians, Woodson sought to engage Black civic leaders, high school teachers, clergymen, women groups, and fraternal association in his project to improve the understanding of Afro-American history. Okay? So, and of course, as I spoke about the Journal of Negro History that was founded in 1916, and it says it has never missed an issue, despite the Great Depression, loss of support from foundation, and 2 years, 2 world wars. In 2002, it was renamed the Journal of African American History and continued to be published by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. All right. So, go down. It says, Woodson believed that education and increasing social and professional contacts among Blacks and white could reduce racism, and he promoted the organized study of African American history partly for that purpose. He would later promote the first Negro History Week in Washington, D.C. in 1926, forerunner of Black History Month. The Bronzeville neighborhood declined during the 1960s and 70s, like many others inner city neighborhoods across the country, and the Wabash Avenue YMCA was forced to close during the 1970s until being restored in 1992 by the Renaissance Collaborative. All right. It says he served as the academic dean of the West Virginia Collegiate Institute, now West Virginia State University, from 1920 to 1922. By 1922, Woodson experience of academic politics and intrigue had left him so disenchanted with university life that he vowed never to work in academia again. He studied many aspects of African American history. For instance, in 1924, he published the first survey of free Black slave owners in the United States in 1830. Yes, you read that right. Black slave owners in the United States of 1830. Yes, there were Black slave owners. Okay. Now, what people don't know is at one point in time, he had association with the NAACP. However, because there was some differences going on inside the organization, Mr. Woodson decided to go his separate way and leave behind. As a matter of fact, he even had some differences with W.E.B. Du Bois. But let's just read on right here about the NAACP. So Woodson became affiliated with the Washington, D.C. branch of the NAACP and is chairman, Archibald Grimke. On January 28, 1915, Woodson wrote a letter to Grimke expressing his dissatisfaction with activities and making two proposals: that the branch secure an office for a center to which persons may report whatever concern the Black race may have, and from which the association may extend its operation into every part of the city, and that a canvasser be appointed to enlist members and obtain subscription for the crisis. The NAACP magazine edited by W.E.B. Du Bois. Du Bois added the proposal to divert patronage from business establishment which do not treat races alike, that is boycott businesses. Woodson wrote that he would cooperate as one of the 25 effective canvassers, adding that he would pay the office rent for 1 month. Grimke did not welcome Woodson's idea. Responding to Grimke's comment about his proposal on March 18th of 1915, Woodson wrote, "I am not afraid of being sued by white businessmen. In fact, I should welcome such a lawsuit. It would do the cause much good. Let us banish fear. We have been in this mental state for 3 centuries. I am a radical. I am ready to act, and if I can find brave men to help me." His differences of opinion with Grimke, who wanted a more conservative course, contribute to Woodson's ending his affiliation with the NAACP. So, Woodson was more so of a radical-minded black person. He was very radical. And the NAACP wanted to be more conservative. And at that time, when W.E.B. Du Bois was a part of the NAACP, he was more so conservative. He was very conservative. He was like the bougie Negro, if you will, because he still was trying to understand the concept of racism by him coming from the North and coming from a middle-class family and being raised in a prestigious environment. He never really had to deal with racism on the level as his other counterpart did in the South. So it wasn't until he came to the South, to Atlanta, Georgia, and that's when he started really seeing things for what they really were. And he realized, okay, we got to take a different approach, because this approach, what the NAACP doing, is not really enough. So anyway, but Carter G Woodson was very radical, and you could say he was very pro-black. You could say he was a black nationalist, and you can describe him as a pan-Africanist in a sense, but I don't think that's what he see himself as. I think he just seen himself as an educator of the black community, a scholar to the black academics. I think that's how he looked at himself, not more so of a black nationalist. But yeah. But anyways, let's go ahead and let's go down. Let's talk about the Black history. Give me a second. Okay. So let's go down. Let's look at the concept about Black history real quick. Okay. And then we're going to get into the books. So Black History Month. Now let's talk about the importance of Black History Month and how did it come about? Why? Black History Month. Woodson devoted the rest of his life to historical research. He worked to preserve the history of African Americans and accumulated a collection of thousands of artifacts and publications. He noted that African American contributions were overlooked, ignored, and even suppressed by the writers of history textbooks and the teachers who used them. Race prejudice, he concluded, is merely the logical result of tradition, the inevitable outcome of thorough instruction to the effect that the Negro has never contributed anything to the progress of mankind. So, as we can see, the summer of 1919 was the Red Summer, a time of intense racial violence that saw about 1,000 people, most of whom were Black, killed between May and September 1919. The face of widespread disillusionment felt in Black America caused by Red Summer. Carter worked hard to improve the understanding of Black history. Later writing, "I have made every sacrifice to this movement. I have spent all my life, all my time doing this one thing and trying to do it effectively." The 1920s were a time of rising Black self-consciousness expressed variously in movements such as the Harlem Renaissance and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, led by an extreme charismatic Jamaican immigrant, Marcus Garvey. In this atmosphere, Woodson was considered by other Black Americans to be one of their most important community leaders who discovered their lost history. Woodson project for the new Negro history had a dual purpose of giving Black Americans a history to be proud of, and to ensure that the overlooked role of Blacks in American history was acknowledged by white historians. Woodson wrote that he wanted a history that would ensure that the world see the Negro as a participant rather than as a lay figure in history. All right. And so I'm going to skip down to, in 1926, Woodson pioneered the celebration of Negro History Week, designated for the second week in February, to coincide with marking the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. The Black United Students and Black educators at Kent State University expanded this idea to include an entire month beginning on February the 1st, 1970. So beginning in 1976, every U.S. president has designated February as Black History Month. All right. So, and it says colleagues, Woodson believed in self-reliance and racial respect values he shared with Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican activist who worked in New York. Woodson became a regular columnist for Garvey's weekly Negro World. So here's the thing. Woodson and Garvey both worked together because they both had common ideas. They both shared similar ideologies. They both were radical. So he helped do like he was a writer in one of Garvey's newspaper. He wrote about history, he wrote about everything. So him and Garvey did work together. And a lot of people did not know that Carter G Woodson and Marcus Garvey had a relationship as far as working towards the advancement for Black people. So yeah. So again, you could say he was a pro-Black. You could say he was a Black nationalist or Pan-Africanist. I mean, you could put him in that category because that's what he was really in a nutshell. All right, so now let me go down here real quick and let's talk about his let's continue right here. It says Woodson's political activism placed him at the center of a circle of many Black intellectuals and activists from the 1920s to the 1940s. He corresponded with W.E.B. Du Bois, John E. Bruce, Arterio Alfonso Schomburg, Hubbard H. Harrison, T. Thomas Fortune, and among others, even with the extended duties of association. Woodson was able to write academic works such as The History of the Negro Church, The Miseducation of the Negro, which is the most popular book, and that was written in 1933, and others which continue to have wide readership. All right, so it says he did not shy away from controversial subject and use the pages of Black World to contribute to debates. One issue related to West Indian/African-American relation, he summarized that the West Indian Negro is free and observed that the West Indian societies had been more successful at properly dedicating the necessary amounts of time and resources needed to educate and generally emancipate people. Woodson approved of efforts by West Indians to include materials related to Black history and culture into their school curricula. And it said he was ostracized by some of his contemporaries because of his insistence on defining a category of history related to ethnic culture and race. At the time, these educators felt that it was wrong to teach or understand African-American history as separate from more general American history. According to these educated, Negroes were simply Americans, dark-skinned, but with no history apart from that of any other. Thus, Woodson effort to get Black culture and history into the curricula of institution, even historically Black colleges, were often unsuccessful. All right, so, and let's go down to his death. Woodson died suddenly from a heart attack in the office within his home in the Shaw, Washington, D.C. neighborhood on April the 3rd, 1950, at the age of 74. He is buried at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Suitland, Maryland. All right, so it says the time that schools have set aside each year to focus on African American history is Woodson's most visible legacy. His determination to further the recognition of the Negro in American and world history, however, inspired countless other scholars. Woodson remained focused on his work throughout his life. Many see him as a man of vision and understanding. Although Woodson was among the ranks of the educated few, he did not feel particularly sentimental about elite educational institutions. The association and journal that he started are still operating. Both have earned intellectual respect. All right. So, also Carter G Woodson. Carter G Woodson, when he passed, he did not have children, nor was he married. So he died alone pretty much because he was too busy moving around. He didn't have the time to settle down and have a family. He was so focused on academia and his activism work to where family was the last thing that was on his mind. So yeah, he died in his office, unfortunately. But, you know, that's what happened. When you put in too much hard work and you put in a lot of stress, you don't have the time for yourself. And it's very important that we have to make time for ourselves as a people. You know what I'm saying? So that way we can be able to stay focused on what we enjoy doing and our passion. You got to be able to make sure you rest and you got to give your body some time. It's just like somebody who working 2 or 3 jobs. You working so much, but you don't necessarily have the time for yourself. You're too busy trying to make sure the bills is taken care of, which that can really eventually cause a lot of stress in the long run and some form of health disparity. Let's see what else I want to show you guys before I get to the books. I know you guys are anxious, so wait, just give me a minute. All right, so right here, this is one of the books about Carter G Woodson. It's called Carter G Woodson, a Historical Reader, edited by James L. Conyers Jr. So if you want to look up more information about his life, you can go on archive.org and just type in his name, and you'll be able to come across various information about him or whatnot. All right, so yeah. Ooh, everybody done comment on here. Well, damn, everybody on here commenting. I can't get to everybody's comment, but shout out to those in the chat room. Shout out to those on the Facebook world. So in the Facebook comments, shout out to y'all. Thank y'all for coming through. Make sure y'all go ahead and share this channel. Hit the notification bell and all that good stuff, whatnot. So right here, this is the first book that Carter G Woodson wrote. Well, no, it was one of the first book he wrote, which was The Education of the Negro. So I'm going to read a chapter from this book right here. And then I'm going to get to the Miseducation of the Negro. All right, so I'm not going to read the whole entire chapter. But here it is. It's chapter 1 called The Education of the Negro prior to 1861. It says, brought from the African wilds to constitute the laboring class of a pioneer society in the New World, the heathen slaves had to be trained to meet the needs of their environment. It required little argument to convince intelligent masters that slaves who had some conception of modern civilization and understood the language of their owners would be more valuable than rude men with whom one could not communicate. The questions, however, as to exactly what kind of training these Negroes should have and how far it should go were how far it should go were to the white race then as much a matter of perplexity as they are now. Yet believing that slaves could not be enlightened without developing in them a longing for liberty, not a few masters maintained that the more brutish the bondmen, the more planting they become for purpose of exploitation. It was this class of slaveholders that finally won the majority of Southerners to their way of thinking and determined that Negroes should not be educated. Yep, and it's coming from this book. It says the history of the education of the Antebellum Negroes, therefore, falls into two periods. The first extends from the time of the introduction of slavery to the climax of the insurrectionary movement about 1835, when the majority of the people in this country answered in the affirmative the question whether or not it was prudent to educate their slaves. Then followed the second period, when the Industrial Revolution changed slavery from a patriarchal to economic institution, and when intelligent Negroes, encouraged by abolitionists, made so many attempts to organize surveil insurrections that the pendulum began to swing the other way. By this time, most Southern white people reached the conclusion that it was impossible to cultivate the minds of Negroes without arousing overmuch self-assertion. And then it goes on to say the early advocates of the education of Negroes were of three classes. First, masters who desired to increase the economic efficiency of their labor supplies. Second, sympathetic persons who wished to help the oppressed. And third, zealous missionaries who, believing that the message of divine love came equally to all, taught slaves the English language that they might learn the principles of the Christian religion. Through the kindness of the first class, slaves had their best chance for mental improvement. Each slaveholder dealt with the situation to suit himself regardless of public opinion. Later, when measures were passed to prohibit the education of slaves, some masters, always a law unto themselves, continued to teach their Negroes in defiance of the hostile legislation. Sympathetic persons were not able to accomplish much because they were usually reformers who not only did not own slaves, but dwelt in practically free settlements far from the plantation on which the bondmen lived. All right, so that is this book right here. So basically, he was talking about what he was going in detail that people did not acknowledge that the African who was brought here as a slave already had some form of education, but they were not educated on the level on the Western spectrum. So even when they were slaves during the time, the slave owners did not believe that blacks should be educated. Blacks should not learn how to read and write because they were in fear that there was going to be some form of rebellion taking place, and they were going to use information against them. So that's why they did not educate the slaves until later on. But there was those who took the risk on their life, and they would learn. So they would learn through missionaries and those who were sympathetic. And there was some slave masters who gave permission for other slaves to learn. And then there were those who would just do it behind the slave master's back and without him knowing that they going in there trying to learn how to read a book or learning how to speak a language. That's why people don't understand Ebonics. The reason why Ebonics come into play is because it was a mixture of African languages and the English language. So Ebonics is like a broken English in a nutshell, basically a combination of the African sound or the tongue mixed in with the English tongue. And that was the way for African people to communicate with each other without the master trying to figure out what they were saying and what message they were conveying. So, for example, like the Gullah Geechee language. The Gullah Geechee language is broken English and African language. So if you listen to how the Gullah Geechee people sound, you'll think they sound like Jamaicans or somebody from the Caribbean. But they spoke like that for a reason. Why? Because they were trying to keep communication amongst themselves, right? So they can be able to give directions or give orders or be able to just have a interaction. So that way the slave master would not be able to pinpoint what they're talking about. Because if the master knew that, oh, they knew how to speak English, then they would be in trouble. So they had to like mash it up. So they had to creolize it. And the word Creole basically means mix. You know what I'm saying? So, but Creole is also a language too. It's also English mixed with other indigenous language as well. And you got the people. But anyways, let me go ahead and continue. So the next book I have, The Miseducation of the Negro. So I'm going to read some segments out of this book, the ones that I highlighted that I think is very important. So, all right, let me go ahead and get started. All right, so let's read the preface. Because I told you this man was very radical. All right, so I want to read this part. It says, this new program of Uplift, the author contends, should not be decided upon by the trials and error method in the application of devices used in dealing with others in a different situation and at another epoch. Only by careful study of the Negro himself and the life which he is forced to lead can we arrive at the proper procedure in this crisis. The mere imparting of information is not education. Above all things, the effort must result in making a man think or do for himself, just as the Jews have done in spite of universal persecution. All right. And it says, the only question which concerns us here is whether these educated persons are actually equipped to face the ordeal before them or unconsciously contribute to their own undoing by perpetuating their regimen of the oppressor. And it's coming from this book. All right, and then also it goes on to say, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place, quote unquote, and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education make is necessary. All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at some more information that he was saying. He said the thought of the inferiority of the Negro is drilled into him in almost every class he enters and almost every book he studies. Practically all of the successful Negroes in this country are the uneducated type or of that of Negroes who have had no formal education at all. Does this sound familiar as of today? Now, remember, this book was written in 1933. 1933 and 2020 gives you what? That was 87 years ago. He wrote this. It's still prevalent to this day. And speaking of that, when we talk about educated Negroes, right, who are particularly uneducated and unaware they're uneducated or they're illiterate psychologically illiterate. Let's talk about, well, you know what? I'll do a video later on about Michael Eric Dyson. Michael Eric Dyson, who is a sociologist from Detroit, Michigan. Okay. He's the light-skinned guy with the glasses. He was known for being on the program they had on BET called Hip Hop in America, right? And he has a fascination with hip hop artists and whatnot, and he's known for his little rhymes and all that good stuff. He had wrote plenty of books. One of the books that he wrote about was Tupac's life. Yeah, so I got one of his books somewhere laying around here. But anyways, he gave his commentary in an interview which he did with Don Lemon on CNN regard to Joe Biden. And he made a statement which I thought that it was a bootlicking comment. Oh, I don't know if I should call it somebody being a coon or being a sellout. I don't know what you call this, but he basically said that Joe Biden appointed a general who happened to be a black man. He said by Joe Biden appointing a general, that was his way of giving reparation to black people in America. That's his way of giving reparation to black people in America. This is what Michael Dyson said. By Joe Biden appointing a black general into the White House, because as of lately, Joe Biden been appointing a lot of blacks in the positions ever since he done got elected. And of course, Dyson said, well, that's his way of saying, that's his way of paying reparation to black folks. And he also told black people that, hey, I owe you. Now, what president would you ever hear say, I owe you? Now, this is his words to Don Lemon. But anyways, to give an example of what Carter G Woodson talking about, Michael Dyson will represent that prime example of what this brother is speaking in this book. But let's go ahead and continue. It says the large majority of the Negroes who have put on the finishing touches of our best colleges are all but worthless in the development of their people. If after leaving school, they have the opportunity to give out to Negroes what traducers of the race would like to have it learned, such persons may thereby earn a living at teaching or preaching what they have been taught, but they never become a constructive force in the development of the race. The so-called school then becomes a questionable factor in the life of this despised people. As another has well said, to handicap a student by teaching him that his blackface is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. Let me read that again. To handicap a student by teaching him that his blackface is a curse, that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless, is the worst sort of lynching. Oh, here's another one. In the schools of business administration, Negroes are trained exclusively in the psychology, economics of Wall Street, and are therefore made to despise the opportunity to run ice wagons, push banana carts, and sell peanuts among their own people. Foreigners who had not studied economics but have studied Negroes take up this business and grow rich. Peace, Sister Courtney. How you doing? In School of Journalism, Negroes are being taught how to edit such metropolitan dailies as the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times, which would hardly hire a Negro as a janitor. And when these graduates come to the Negro weeklies for employment, they are not prepared to function in such establishment, which to be successful must be built upon accurate knowledge of the psychology and philosophy of the Negro. All right, and I'm gonna read this last three. When a Negro has finished his education in our schools, then he has been equipped to begin the life of an Americanized or Europeanized white man. When a Negro has finished his education in our schools, then he has been equipped to begin the life of an Americanized or Europeanized white man. But before he steps from the threshold of his alma mater, he is told by his teachers that he must go back to his own people from whom he has been estranged by a vision of ideas, which in his disillusionment he will realize that he cannot attain. And it says, in this effort to imitate, however, these educated people are sincere. They hope to make the Negro conform quickly to the standard of the whites and thus remove the pretext for the barriers between the races. They do not realize, however, that even if the Negroes do successfully imitate the whites, nothing new has thereby been accomplished. You simply have a larger number of persons doing what others have been doing. The unusual gifts of the race have not thereby been developed, and unwilling world therefore continues to wonder what the Negro is good for. And it says, these educated people, however, decry any such thing as race consciousness, and in some respects they are right. They do not like to hear such expression as Negro literature, Negro poetry, art, African art, or thinking black, and roughly speaking, we must concede that such things do not exist. These things did not figure in the courses which they pursued in school, and why should they? Aren't we all American? Then whatever is American is as much the heritage of the Negro as any other group in this country. This book right here is still relevant. If you ain't got this book, you might want to go ahead and get it. You might want to go ahead and get this book and get this one as well. Get these two books. I mean, you're reading a man who wrote this book 87 years ago. Okay, this book came out 87 years ago, 1933, and it's still prevalent to this day. It still has valid points to this day. All right, but anyways, and like I mentioned, I read this book like 2 or 3 times. I read it so much that I had highlighted some information in this book. But anyhow, let's see. Anyways, you guys, Carter G Woodson. Carter G said, "We don't need more leaders. We need more doers/workers." I mean, he's right. Because what he was trying to say is he needs more people. There needs to be more people who put in the application, who put into the work. Not those who can just be a leader. I mean, anybody can say they're a leader, but what about those who put in those applications? What about those who put in the work? You know, but that's one of the reasons why Ice Cube, when he said in his interview that he wanted to talk to those who were economists, those who were in the public relation field, to discuss about Black America and reparation. He didn't want to just be in there with a bunch of entertainers. And people did not understand. People thought, oh, he's just being a coon, he's being a sellout, blah, blah, blah. No, it was not about that. It was about, well, if we're going to look for a solution and we're going to push efforts for the Black community, we cannot do it just through entertainment. We cannot do it just by speaking to a bunch of celebrities. He said we got to speak to people who are actually in the field of economics and politics and public relations and psychology, etc. And I'm just translating or summing it up to basically what he was trying to get at. That's what Ice Cube wanted, but of course, you have those brain dead Negroes out there who was beating this man up left or right, talking about he was being a sellout, talking about he was being a coon and all this other stuff, and not even understand his idea, not even thinking. The man was smart. It's just those who were trying to beat him up, they weren't smart. They were too busy operating from their impulses. They too busy being one-sided. And you know what? Speaking of that, what I notice when I get stuff in the mail regarding to politicians, I notice that every time you get stuff in the mail, they always talk about, it's always somebody got to be Democrat. Not somebody that's from an independent party, not somebody that's a Republican. But it's always somebody got to be Democrat. And it's like, well, what you trying to tell Black people they need to just vote just Democrats? Why can't Black people vote for either parties? Why we have to just vote for Democrat? So I'm using this as an example to say that we have just been conditioned and we have been limited to option. Instead of being open-minded to various options, we have been limited to this much option. Our option has been very limited. So when we get stuff in the mail about voting, registration, or whatnot, and all these flyers, it's always got to be somebody Democrat. Different people, but they from the Democratic Party. So you tell me I got to vote. So what are you trying to say? We should just vote amongst those who are just Democrats? But this is how we've been conditioned as a people. Anyways, I say that this is psychology and sociology in a nutshell. These two books, not just history, but psychology and sociology, and philosophy and social philosophy. These two books right here. So make sure you get it. Now let me put that screen up for you. Get this book. Get this book. Can't tell you no other way. Get the book. That's right. And you're right. Too many want the title, but few want to battle. Exactly. Because being a leader requires work. It requires work. That's what it requires. It requires you doing. That's what leadership all about. Then you want to know why people can't take you very seriously. Can't nobody take you very seriously if you say you're a leader, but you're not giving in the work and you're not putting in the effort. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for today. That's all for today. And I want to thank you guys who have been tuning in and watching. So with that being said, this your girl Tiffany, and I am logging off. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, a wonderful afternoon, and please be safe. And I will continue to connect with you guys on more topics and information. All right. So later on, hopefully I can do the topic about Michael Eric Dyson and his comment about Joe Biden and Black America and reparation. So yeah, hopefully I can do that later on because I want to really talk about that. I really want to give my opinion and my thoughts on that idiotic statement that he made, because it's very idiotic. But anyways, you guys have a wonderful day. Please be safe, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and also you see the Cash App information at the bottom. If you want to contribute, donate, you're more than welcome to do so. But other than that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share it. Make sure you like it, and we'll go from there. All right. With that being said, peace. Have a good one.